Chosen one, listen closely, because what you are about to hear is not something you should casually brush aside. There are things God allowed to remain hidden for a season, not because he had forgotten you, but because he was preparing you for the moment when the truth would no longer destroy you. It would set you free. What was whispered behind your back? What was concealed from your understanding? What, Jay, never wanted you to discover, God has brought into the light. You may have questioned your own discernment, your own memories, even your own worth, but heaven saw everything, and now revelation is beginning to speak. Chosen one, there is a reason you have felt that something was not adding up. There is a reason certain conversations never made sense, certain behaviors seemed strangely inconsistent, and certain people could look you directly in the eyes while withholding what you deserved to know. You were not imagining everything. You were not simply being overly sensitive. There were moments when your spirit sensed a contradiction before your mind could explain it. And sometimes God allows you to feel the tension before he gives you the explanation. You wanted answers immediately. You wanted the truth while the situation was still unfolding. You wanted someone to come forward and admit what they had done, what they had said, what they had hidden. But God did not rush the revelation, because God is not merely interested in exposing something. He is interested in protecting you from what would happen if you discovered it before you were ready. There are truths that can break a person when they discover them too early, but there are also truths that become chains when they remain hidden too long. And God knows exactly when the door of revelation should open. Jay may have believed that certain things would remain buried. Perhaps they thought you would never connect the pieces. Perhaps they assumed time would erase your questions. Perhaps they convinced themselves that you would eventually stop asking why everything changed, why certain opportunities disappeared, why certain relationships became complicated, or why you suddenly felt pushed into a season of isolation. But what people forget is that they can hide information from you without hiding anything from God. They can control a conversation. They can edit a story. They can present themselves as innocent. They can make themselves look like the victim. They can convince others that their intentions were pure. But they cannot rewrite what happened before the God who sees the heart. That is why you should not be consumed by revenge. You do not have to become obsessed with exposing, Jay. You do not have to spend every night replaying old conversations. You do not have to gather evidence simply to prove to people that your instincts were right. God is capable of revealing what needs to be revealed. And when God reveals something, he does not need you to manipulate the situation to make the truth believable. The truth carries its own weight. Chosen one, there may have been a time when you begged God to show you who was genuine and who was not. You may have prayed, Lord, remove anyone who is not meant to be in my life. And then, strangely enough, things began to change. People became distant, messages became shorter, promises were broken, masks began slipping. Situations you thought would last forever suddenly ended. At first, you may have interpreted those changes as rejection. But what if some of what you called rejection was actually divine protection? What if the closed door was not punishment? What if the unanswered message was not humiliation? What if the person walking away was not proof that you were unworthy? What if God was answering the prayer you were too emotional to recognize? Sometimes we ask God to remove what is harming us, and then we cry when he actually removes it. We say we want discernment, and then we become angry when discernment changes the people we trust. We ask God to reveal motives, and then we become uncomfortable when the revelation is not what we hoped it would be. But God loves you too much to preserve an illusion simply because you are emotionally attached to it. Chosen one, Jay, never wanted you to know everything because knowledge would have changed the way you looked at the situation. Maybe they knew that if you understood the full story, you would stop blaming yourself. Maybe they knew that if you knew what was really said, you would stop chasing their approval. Maybe they knew that if you understood the motives behind certain actions, you would no longer beg for the same relationship to return. And perhaps that is exactly why the revelation is arriving now. Because God wants to break the cycle of you questioning your worth based on somebody else's behavior. You have spent too much time asking, what was wrong with me? God may be trying to teach you to ask a different question. What was I being protected from? That question changes everything. Because when you believe every loss is proof that you are not enough, you become desperate to recover what God removed. But when you understand that some losses are divine protection, you stop chasing closed doors. You stop begging people to explain why they left. You stop trying to convince someone to recognize your value. You begin to understand that your worth was never determined by their ability to appreciate you. And that is one of the deepest revelations God can give a person. Chosen one, there are people who only recognize your value after they lose access to you. They become comfortable with your presence. They assume your patience will always be available. They assume your heart will always make room for them. They assume you will keep forgiving without boundaries. They assume you will continue explaining yourself, And then one day something changes. You become quiet. You stop chasing. You stop explaining. You stop reacting. And suddenly they realize that the version of you they had access to is no longer available. That does not mean you became cold. It means you finally understood stewardship. You learned that your peace is something you must protect. Your attention is something you must steward. Your energy is something you must guard. Your heart is not a public place where everyone gets unlimited access. And perhaps Jay has noticed that change. Perhaps they are wondering why you are no longer responding the way you used to. Perhaps they are asking other people about you. Perhaps they are watching from a distance. Perhaps they are trying to understand why you seem different. But the most important thing is not whether Jay understands. The most important thing is that you understand. God is teaching you that you cannot build your future while constantly negotiating with your past. You cannot step into a new season while demanding that an old season explain itself completely. Some things will only make sense after you have moved forward. There are chapters that become understandable only when you reach the next page. And chosen one, you are reaching a page where certain things that once confused you will suddenly become obvious. You will look back and say, "No, I understand why that door closed." You will remember the person you were desperate to keep and realize that losing them preserved something inside you. You will remember the opportunity you cried over and realize that another opportunity eventually carried you farther. You will remember the season when nobody seemed to understand you and realize that God was teaching you how to hear His voice without needing everyone else's approval. This is why you cannot allow the hidden behavior of another person to define your identity. If Jay lied, that does not make you foolish. If Jay manipulated circumstances, that does not make you weak. If Jay misunderstood you, that does not make you who they said you were. If Jay walked away, that does not mean God walked away. People can abandon you while God is positioning you. People can reject you while God is redirecting you. People can underestimate you while God is developing you. And sometimes the very moment you think your story is ending is the moment God is quietly preparing its greatest transition. Chosen one, you must also understand something about revelation. God does not reveal everything so you can retaliate. He reveals things so you can release them. There is a difference. Revenge keeps you connected to the person who hurt you. Release breaks the connection. Revenge says, "I need you to suffer because you made me suffer." Release says, "Trust God enough to let Him handle what I cannot." Revenge keeps your eyes on Jay. Release puts your eyes back on God. And perhaps that is why this revelation has been uncomfortable. Because God is not simply telling you what happened. He is showing you what must change inside you because of what happened. You cannot control what Jay did. You cannot control what they said. You cannot control what they told other people. You cannot control whether they ever apologize. But you can control whether their actions continue to occupy your mind. You can decide that their betrayal will not become your identity. You can decide that their deception will not make you suspicious of everyone. You can decide that their inability to love you correctly will not convince you that you are difficult to love. You can decide that what happened to you will not become what defines you. And chosen one, perhaps God has been trying to tell you that your story is much bigger than Jay. You have been staring at one person while heaven has been preparing an entire future. You have been asking why one door closed while God has been building another door. You have been trying to understand one conversation while God has been orchestrating circumstances you have not even seen yet. That is why you cannot become emotionally imprisoned by the person who is only a chapter. Some people enter your life to accompany you. Some enter to teach you. Some enter to challenge you. Some enter to reveal something about yourself. And some leave because their assignment in your story has ended. Not every ending is an enemy attack. Some endings are simply endings. And sometimes God uses endings to create space for beginnings that would never have fit otherwise. Chosen one, Jay, may never tell you the whole truth. You need to be prepared for that. You may never receive the apology you imagined. You may never hear them admit what they did. You may never get the satisfying conversation where every question is answered. But you do not need another person's confession for God to validate what He already knows. Your healing cannot depend on somebody else becoming honest. Your peace cannot depend on somebody else becoming mature. Your future cannot depend on somebody else finally understanding your value. If they apologize, let God deal with that. If they return, let God give you discernment. If they explain themselves, listen without surrendering your wisdom. And if they never return, do not interpret their absence as the absence of God's favor. Sometimes the person who refuses to come back is exactly the person God was trying to remove. Chosen one. There is something powerful about reaching the point where you no longer need to prove your innocence to everyone. There is freedom in knowing that God saw your heart when other people misunderstood it. There is peace in realizing that you do not have to defend every chapter of your life. There are people who will misunderstand you no matter how carefully you explain yourself. So stop spending your entire life trying to make everyone understand. Jesus himself was misunderstood. Joseph was betrayed by people close to him. David was pursued despite being chosen. Daniel was targeted despite his integrity. And yet none of those attacks canceled what God had spoken over their lives. Opposition does not automatically mean you are outside God's will. Sometimes opposition appears because something inside you is threatening an old pattern. Your growth may make certain people uncomfortable. Your boundaries may expose people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. Your silence may reveal those who depended on your reaction. Your healing may disturb people who were comfortable with your wounded version. That is why you must not apologize for becoming healthier. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to stop participating in conversations that drain you. You are allowed to leave environments where your peace is constantly under attack. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to protect what God is building inside you. And you are allowed to walk away without hatred. Chosen one, hear this clearly. Forgiveness does not always mean access. You can forgive someone and still establish distance. You can release resentment and still maintain boundaries. You can pray for someone and still understand that they are not safe for your future. You can wish someone well without inviting them back into a position they previously mishandled. That is wisdom. That is maturity. That is discernment. And perhaps, Jay, expected your forgiveness to mean that everything would return to the way it was. But God may be teaching you that forgiveness is about freeing your heart, not restoring every relationship to its previous position. There are doors that should remain closed even after the anger disappears. There are bridges you can stop burning without rebuilding them. There are people you can stop hating without trusting again. And there are memories you can stop revisiting without pretending they never happened. God does not require you to erase history. He requires you to stop allowing history to control your destiny. Chosen one, the revelation may hurt before it heals. Sometimes when the truth arrives, there is grief attached to it. You may grieve the person you thought Jay was. You may grieve the future you imagined. You may grieve the trust you once had. You may grieve the version of yourself who believed everything would work out differently. But grief is not failure. Grief is evidence that something mattered to you. Let yourself acknowledge it without building your home inside it. Cry if you need to. Pray if you need to. Be quiet if you need to. But do not stay there forever, because there is still life ahead of you. There are still prayers God intends to answer. There are still people you have not met. There are still places you have not seen. There are still opportunities you have not imagined. There are still parts of yourself that have not awakened. And there is still a future that does not require Jay to participate. That future is what you need to protect. Chosen one, perhaps the greatest thing God revealed was not what Jay did. Perhaps it was who you are becoming. Because sometimes God allows you to discover another person's hidden intentions so that you can finally discover your own strength. You thought you needed their validation. You thought you needed their explanation. You thought you needed their presence. But slowly, painfully, beautifully, God is showing you that you can survive without what you once thought you could not live without. And once you discover that, you become dangerous to every manipulation that depended on your fear of losing people. You stop bargaining. You stop begging. You stop shrinking. You stop abandoning yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. And that is when your life begins to change. Because the chosen one who knows their value does not have to announce it constantly. They simply live from it. They walk differently. They choose differently. They speak differently. They protect their peace differently. They pray differently. They no longer need every person to agree with them before they trust what God placed within them. And Jay may not understand this transformation. That is okay. They do not have to understand it. Your assignment is not to make them understand. Your assignment is to keep walking, keep growing, keep praying, keep becoming, keep listening, keep choosing truth over comfort, keep choosing obedience over emotional attachment, keep choosing peace over unnecessary conflict. Because what God has for you is not dependent upon someone else's approval. And if the truth about Jay is being revealed, let it become confirmation, not obsession. Let it remind you that God sees what you cannot see. Let it remind you that your prayers were heard even when the answer took time. Let it remind you that silence from heaven does not mean absence from heaven. Sometimes God is working in places you cannot observe. Sometimes He is rearranging circumstances behind the scenes. Sometimes He is allowing people to reveal themselves without your interference. And sometimes the greatest evidence that God is protecting you is the fact that something you desperately wanted did not happen. You called it disappointment. He called it protection. You called it delay. He called it preparation. You called it rejection. He called it redirection. You called it loneliness. He called it separation. And you called the silence punishment, when perhaps God was using the silence to teach you how to recognize His voice. Chosen one, do not rush back into something simply because the truth has been revealed. Revelation should produce wisdom. If God showed you something, learn from it. If God exposed a pattern, do not repeat it. If God revealed manipulation, strengthen your boundaries. If God revealed dishonesty, stop negotiating with dishonesty. If God revealed that you were being taken for granted, learn to value yourself without waiting for someone else to do it. The revelation is not complete until your behavior changes. Because knowing the truth while continuing the same cycle is not freedom. Freedom means the truth has transformed the way you move. And perhaps this is the moment when you finally stop asking God to give you back what He removed. Perhaps this is the moment you say, Lord, if you removed it, help me trust you enough not to chase it. That prayer can change everything. Because surrender is not giving up. Surrender is giving God permission to lead you somewhere your emotions cannot yet see. And chosen one, if Jay never wanted you to know this, remember that God did not reveal it to destroy you. He revealed it because you were ready to stop living according to an incomplete story. You are not the person who began this journey. You have learned. You have endured. You have survived moments that once convinced you that you would never recover. And now you are beginning to understand why you had to become stronger. Not stronger so you could fight everyone. Stronger so you could recognize what deserves access to you. Stronger so you could walk away without needing revenge. Stronger so you could hear God even when people around you were speaking loudly. Stronger so you could stand alone without believing you were abandoned. Stronger so you could receive what is coming without bringing old wounds into new rooms. Because the next season will require a different version of you. And that is why the revelation came now. Not to keep you staring backward, but to teach you how to walk forward with your eyes open. So when you hear another rumor, you will not panic. When someone misunderstands you, you will not collapse. When someone leaves, you will not automatically assume you are worthless. When someone returns, you will not automatically open the door. You will pray, you will discern, you will observe, you will listen, and you will let God lead. Because the days of blindly trusting every voice are ending. The days of abandoning yourself to keep others are ending. The days of begging for clarity from people committed to confusion are ending. And the days of allowing Jay or anyone else to determine how you see yourself are ending. God has revealed enough for you to move differently. And there is still more that will become clear as you continue walking. You do not need every answer tonight. You need enough faith to take the next step. Because sometimes revelation comes in layers. First, God shows you what happened. Then He shows you why it mattered. Then He shows you what it produced. And finally, He shows you what He was preparing you for all along. Chosen one. And this is where you need to pay even closer attention. Because the next part of this revelation is not about what happened behind you. It is about what God is doing within you because of what happened. There are moments in life when God allows the truth to surface, not because He wants you trapped in the details, but because He wants you free from the emotional power those details once held over you. You may have spent months or even years trying to understand why Jay acted the way they did, why certain things were hidden, why certain words were spoken in private, and why the version of events you were given never completely settled in your spirit. But now you are beginning to realize that your discernment was not your enemy. Your discernment was trying to protect you. Chosen one, there is a difference between suspicion and discernment. Suspicion is driven by fear. Discernment is strengthened by wisdom. Suspicion makes you accuse everyone. Discernment teaches you to observe before you trust. Suspicion makes you restless. Discernment gives you peace even when the answer is difficult. And there is a reason you are being taught to distinguish between the two. You cannot enter a new season carrying the fear created by an old season. You cannot allow one person's deception to make you believe that everyone is deceptive. You cannot allow one betrayal to convince you that love itself is dangerous. You cannot allow one disappointment to make you reject every opportunity that God places before you. That is why your healing has to go deeper than discovering what Jay did. You have to discover what their actions taught you about yourself. Maybe they taught you that you were stronger than you thought. Maybe they taught you that you needed boundaries. Maybe they taught you that not everyone who speaks kindly has pure intentions. Maybe they taught you that actions are more reliable than promises. Maybe they taught you that silence can sometimes reveal more than words. Maybe they taught you that your relationship with God cannot be based on whether other people treat you fairly. And perhaps that last lesson is the one heaven wants you to understand most. People will disappoint you. God will not. People can change their minds. God remains faithful. People can make promises and break them. God's character does not depend upon human inconsistency. People can forget what they said yesterday. God does not forget what He has spoken over your life. Chosen one, there were moments when you thought God was silent because nothing was changing. But perhaps God was silent because He was allowing the truth to reveal itself without you forcing it. You wanted to confront. God wanted you to watch. You wanted to expose. God wanted you to observe. You wanted immediate answers. God wanted you to develop patience. And now you can see why. Had you confronted everything too early, you might have been given another explanation. Had you demanded answers too quickly, you might have received another carefully constructed story. Had you forced the situation open, you might have interrupted the very process God was using to reveal what was hidden. Sometimes the greatest evidence comes when you stop chasing it. Let that settle in your spirit. You do not have to force people to reveal themselves. Give them enough time and enough freedom, and their patterns will eventually speak. A person's character will eventually reveal itself through consistency. A person's intentions will eventually appear through their choices. A person's heart will eventually become visible through how they treat people who can no longer benefit them. Jay may have believed that you were watching only what they wanted you to see, but God sees beyond appearances. God sees motives. God sees private decisions. God sees the conversations nobody else heard. God sees the tears you cried after everyone thought you were fine. God saw when you smiled publicly and broke down privately. God saw when you defended someone who was not defending you. God saw when you gave another chance while knowing deep down that something was wrong. God saw the moment you began questioning yourself. And God saw the moment you finally stopped. That moment mattered. Because there comes a time when God wants you to stop questioning your worth and start questioning the environment that repeatedly made you feel worthless. Chosen one, hear this carefully. Not every place where you struggle is a place where you are supposed to stay. Sometimes you are struggling because the environment is not aligned with who you are becoming. A seed does not fail because it cannot grow on concrete. It needs the right soil. And sometimes you have been blaming yourself because you were trying to grow in a place that could not nourish you. You thought you needed to become smaller. You thought you needed to speak less. You thought you needed to tolerate more. You thought you needed to prove yourself. But God may be showing you that the problem was not that you were too much. The problem was that you were trying to become enough for people who had already decided not to value you. That is not your assignment. Your assignment is not to convince someone to recognize what God already placed inside you. Chosen one, there is a point where explanation becomes exhaustion. You have explained your heart. You have explained your intentions. You have explained why something hurt. You have explained why something mattered. You have explained what you needed. And perhaps Jay heard every word. Perhaps they simply chose not to respond the way you hoped. That realization can hurt, but it can also liberate you. Because once you understand that someone heard you and still chose differently, you stop wasting energy trying to find the perfect words. There was never a perfect sentence that could force someone to become who they were unwilling to become. You cannot communicate another person's character into existence. You cannot love someone into honesty. You cannot sacrifice enough to create gratitude in someone who feels entitled. You cannot keep giving until someone finally learns how to receive. At some point, you have to let people be responsible for who they choose to be, and then you choose who you are going to be. You choose peace. You choose truth. You choose integrity, you choose obedience, you choose growth, you choose God. Chosen one, perhaps Jay expected you to remain emotionally available because of the history you shared. But history does not automatically create entitlement. Just because someone knew an earlier version of you does not mean they are entitled to every future version of you. Just because you loved someone once does not mean you must continue giving them access forever. Just because you prayed for someone does not mean you must remain attached to them. Sometimes prayer is the final act of love before release. You say, God bless them, heal them, guide them, but remove me from what is not mine to carry. That is not hatred, that is surrender. And perhaps this is the prayer you are finally ready to pray, because you are tired of carrying conversations that never happened. You are tired of rehearsing responses to things nobody has asked. You are tired of imagining what you would say if Jay ever admitted everything. You are tired of wondering whether they regret it. You are tired of wondering whether they miss you. You are tired of wondering whether they talk about you. And God is saying, my child, let me handle what you cannot know. There is peace in not knowing everything. You do not need to know what someone thinks about you every morning. You do not need to know who is watching your life. You do not need to know who regrets losing you. You do not need to know who is jealous. You do not need to know who secretly wants you to fail. Your assignment is not surveillance. Your assignment is purpose. Chosen one, some of the energy you have spent trying to understand other people needs to be redirected toward understanding yourself. What do you want now? What kind of life are you building? What habits are you developing? What does obedience look like in this season? What boundaries do you need? What dreams did you stop pursuing because someone convinced you they were impossible? What part of your identity did you silence to keep peace? These are the questions that matter now, because the revelation about Jay is only useful if it leads you toward greater wisdom. Otherwise, it becomes another distraction. You can become so focused on the person who hurt you that you forget to become the person God is calling you to be. Do not let that happen. Do not give Jay more influence over your future through your anger than they ever had through their presence. Think about that. Someone can leave your life and still control you if you spend every day thinking about them. But freedom begins when their name no longer determines your emotional weather. You can remember without reliving. You can acknowledge without obsessing. You can forgive without returning. You can learn without remaining stuck. And that is the maturity God is developing in you. Chosen one, there is another layer to this revelation. Sometimes the people who hurt you become unwilling teachers. They teach you what you will never tolerate again. They show you the warning signs you previously ignored. They force you to develop boundaries you once thought were unnecessary. They reveal the difference between attention and genuine care. They teach you that chemistry is not character. They teach you that words are not commitment. They teach you that proximity does not equal loyalty. And they teach you that being chosen by a person is not more important than being aligned with God. This is why you should not call the entire season wasted. Something painful can still produce wisdom. Something disappointing can still produce maturity. Something you never wanted can still become part of the preparation for what you do want. Joseph did not choose the pit. He did not choose the betrayal. He did not choose the prison. But God used what was meant to destroy him as part of the road toward his assignment. And you may be looking at your own pit right now, wondering why God allowed it. You may not yet see the palace. You may not yet see the purpose. But that does not mean there is no purpose. Sometimes you only understand the significance of a painful chapter after you reach the chapter that required it. Chosen one, J, may have thought they were ending something, but God may have been beginning something. They may have thought they were taking something from you. God may have been creating room for something better. They may have thought your silence meant weakness. God may have been teaching you restraint. They may have thought your departure meant defeat. God may have been creating distance from what was draining your destiny. This is why appearances can be deceptive. A loss can look like loss while heaven sees transition. A delay can look like denial while heaven sees preparation. A closed door can look like failure while heaven sees protection. You do not always have the perspective required to understand what God is doing while He is doing it. That is why faith is necessary. Faith says, I don't understand this, but I trust the one who does. Chosen one, you have to learn to trust God beyond your feelings. Your feelings are real, but they are not always prophetic. You can feel abandoned and still be protected. You can feel forgotten and still be remembered. You can feel behind and still be exactly where you need to be. You can feel like nothing is happening while things are moving beneath the surface. Do not make permanent conclusions from temporary emotions. That is important. You may wake up tomorrow and feel strong. The next day, you may feel sad. Then you may feel angry, then peaceful, then confused again. Healing is not always a straight line. But the fact that you have a difficult day does not mean you are going backward. Keep moving. Keep praying. Keep choosing what is healthy. Keep refusing to reopen doors simply because loneliness knocks. Loneliness can make familiar pain look attractive. Do not confuse familiarity with safety. You may miss Jay and still know that returning would not be wise. You may remember the good moments and still acknowledge the bad ones. You may love someone and still understand that the relationship is not healthy for your future. Those truths can exist at the same time. You do not have to turn someone into a monster to justify leaving them. Sometimes you simply recognize that the relationship no longer aligns with the person you are becoming. That is enough. Chosen one, there is no shame in admitting that you once ignored signs. You were learning. You trusted with the information you had at the time. Do not punish your former self for not knowing what you know now. Your past self did the best they could with the understanding they possessed. Now you know more. Now you see more. Now you have greater discernment. Use it. Do not use your new wisdom to shame your old self. Use it to protect your future self. And perhaps God is showing you that you were never foolish for believing in someone. You were generous. You were hopeful. You were willing to love. Those are not weaknesses. The lesson is not to stop loving. The lesson is to love with wisdom. The lesson is to stop confusing unconditional love with unconditional access. The lesson is to recognize that compassion does not require self-abandonment. Chosen one, you can have a soft heart and strong boundaries. You can be kind and still say no. You can be forgiving and still walk away. You can be spiritual and still use common sense. You can believe in redemption without volunteering to be hurt again. And that balance is important. Because the enemy would love for your pain to push you toward one extreme or another. Either you become so trusting that everyone can manipulate you, or you become so guarded that nobody can reach you. God wants wisdom, not non-vide, not bitterness. Wisdom, and wisdom says, I will listen, but I will also observe. I will forgive, but I will also learn. I will love, but I will also protect what God entrusted to me. Chosen one, maybe the biggest secret, Jay, never wanted you to know is that you were always stronger than the version of you they believed they could control. Maybe they depended on your uncertainty. Maybe they benefited from your need for approval. Maybe they expected you to keep asking for permission to be yourself. But God is breaking that dependence. You no longer need permission to grow. You no longer need permission to leave. You no longer need permission to dream. You no longer need permission to become who God created you to be. And when you finally understand that, something shifts. You stop asking, will they approve? You start asking, does this align with God? You stop asking, will they come back? You start asking, should I even want them back? You stop asking, do they regret losing me? You start asking, why would I measure my worth by their regret? You stop asking, what are they saying about me? You start asking, what is God saying about me? Those questions lead you somewhere different. They lead you toward freedom. Chosen one, the world will always have opinions about your life. Some people will misunderstand you. Some will criticize you. Some will celebrate you. Some will secretly compete with you. Some will only support you when your success does not make them uncomfortable. Some will disappear when you begin to grow. Do not be shocked. Growth changes relationships, not always because you become arrogant, but because your boundaries expose dynamics that previously went unnoticed. The moment you stop participating in dysfunction, people who benefited from dysfunction may accuse you of changing. And you can say, yes, I changed. You do not have to apologize for that. You should change. You should mature. You should grow. You should become wiser. The goal is not to remain the same person just because other people were comfortable with who you used to be. Chosen one, God did not bring you through everything you survived so that you could remain trapped in the identity you had before the trial. There is purpose in your growth. There is purpose in your resilience. There is purpose in your new boundaries. There is purpose in your silence. There is purpose in the way you now observe before reacting. You have learned things that cannot be taught by comfort. You have developed strength that cannot be purchased. You have gained discernment through experience. And now you are responsible for using that wisdom. Do not keep walking back into the same fire just because you finally learned how to survive it. Survival is not the ultimate goal. Living is, peace is, purpose is, joy is. And perhaps that is what God wants you to understand most. Your life is not supposed to revolve around what Jay did. Your life is supposed to revolve around what God is doing. And God is still doing something, even now. Even while you are healing. Even while you are uncertain. Even while you are waiting. Even while you are rebuilding. The story is not finished. Chosen one, you may not have every detail yet, but you have enough to move forward. You know what hurt you. You know what you learned. You know what you will not repeat. You know what your spirit is no longer willing to tolerate. And now you can begin again. Not as the person who was betrayed. Not as the person who was rejected. Not as the person who was misunderstood. But as the person who survived, learned, healed, and kept going. That person is different. That person is wiser. That person knows that God's silence is not abandonment. That person knows that closed doors can be protection. That person knows that not everyone who leaves is a loss. That person knows that some revelations arrive after the relationship ends, because God wants you to see clearly without emotional attachment controlling your interpretation. And that person is ready for what comes next. Chosen one, do not rush the next chapter. Let God write it. You have spent enough time trying to force outcomes. Let the right things come with peace. Let the right relationships be consistent. Let the right opportunities require integrity instead of desperation. Let the right people prove themselves through time. You do not need to chase what God has ordained for you. You do not need to manipulate what is meant for you. You do not need to compete for what belongs to you. What God has for you will not require you to become someone you are not. And if something requires you to abandon your values just to keep it, then perhaps it was never worth keeping. Remember that, because Jay may have been one of the strongest emotional attachments you experienced, but emotional intensity does not automatically equal divine assignment. Sometimes the strongest attachment is the strongest lesson. Sometimes the person you cannot stop thinking about is the person you need to stop giving your attention to. Sometimes the relationship that felt impossible to lose is the relationship that teaches you that you can survive loss. And once you survive it, you discover something extraordinary. You discover yourself. Chosen one, there is a version of you on the other side of this season who will look back and thank God for every moment that forced you to grow. You may not believe that today. You may still be hurting. You may still have questions. You may still wonder why Jay did what they did. But there will come a day when the question will matter less. There will come a day when you realize that the answer was never the destination. The transformation was. The revelation was not given so you could spend your life analyzing Jay. It was given so you could finally stop analyzing yourself through the eyes of Jay. That is the freedom. You are not what they said. You are not what they did. You are not what they withheld. You are not the rejection you experienced. You are not the betrayal. You are not the misunderstanding. You are not the season. You are still becoming, and God is still writing. Chosen one, keep your heart open to God, even if you have to keep certain doors closed to people. Keep believing. Keep praying. Keep walking. Keep your standards. Keep your boundaries. Keep your compassion. Keep your wisdom. Do not let one person's hidden actions make you suspicious of God's visible goodness. There is still goodness ahead. There are still blessings you cannot see. There are still connections that will feel different because they will not require you to constantly question where you stand. There are still opportunities that will not demand that you compromise yourself. There are still places where your gifts will be recognized. And there are still people who will meet the healed version of you and never ask you to become wounded again just to make them comfortable. So let J remain where God has placed that chapter. If they were a lesson, learn it. If they were a warning, remember it. If they were a season, release it. If they were part of your story, honor what you learned without worshiping what ended. And if one day they return with words, let your discernment speak louder than nostalgia. Do not let memories make decisions that wisdom should make, because you are not going back to the same place as the same person. You have changed. You have seen. You have learned. And God has revealed enough for you to stop doubting what your spirit has been trying to tell you. Chosen one, there is a new level of peace waiting for you when you finally accept that not every mystery needs to be solved by you. Some mysteries belong to God. Some explanations will come later. Some never will. And that is okay. You can live without knowing everything. You can move forward without receiving every apology. You can heal without hearing every confession. You can succeed without everyone admitting they were wrong. You can become everything God called you to become without J ever understanding what they lost. That is the freedom they never expected you to discover. You do not need them to recognize your value. You only need to stop abandoning it. And when you stop abandoning yourself, the entire pattern changes. You become selective with your attention. You become careful with your trust. You become intentional with your relationships. You become patient with your decisions. And you become less impressed by words and more attentive to fruit. That is discernment. That is growth. That is what this revelation was preparing you for. Chosen one, so when the memories return, do not panic. When you remember something you once overlooked, do not punish yourself. When another piece of the story becomes clear, breathe. When someone tells you something you did not know, do not immediately react. Take it to God, ask for wisdom. Ask for peace, ask for clarity, and then move accordingly. Because you are no longer required to respond from the wounded version of yourself. You can respond from wisdom. You can pause. You can wait. You can say nothing. You can walk away. You can let God fight battles you once thought you had to fight yourself. And perhaps this is the final shift that J never expected. You are no longer desperate to be understood by someone who chose misunderstanding. You are no longer desperate to be chosen by someone who could not recognize your value. You are no longer desperate to recover what God may have intentionally removed. You are becoming comfortable with divine redirection. And once you become comfortable with God's redirection, you stop being afraid of endings. You begin to see endings as invitations. Invitations to heal. Invitations to grow. Invitations to rebuild. Invitations to become. Invitations to walk into the unknown with faith. So chosen one, stand up in your spirit, not in arrogance, not in revenge, not with hatred. Stand with peace. Stand with wisdom. Stand with humility. Stand with faith. Let the revelation strengthen you, not poison you. Let the truth free you, not consume you. Let what happened teach you, not define you. Because J may have hidden things from you, but they could never hide you from God. They could hide information. They could hide motives. They could hide conversations. They could hide intentions. But they could not hide your tears from heaven. They could not hide your prayers. They could not hide your pain. They could not hide the injustice. And they certainly could not hide the destiny God placed over your life. So keep moving, chosen one. The revelation is not the end. It is the beginning of seeing your life through a clearer lens. The beginning of trusting your discernment without worshiping your fear. The beginning of releasing people without needing to hate them. The beginning of choosing peace without needing everyone to agree. The beginning of understanding that God's protection sometimes looks like loss before it looks like blessing. And as you move forward, you may begin noticing that the things you once begged to return no longer fit the person you are becoming. That is when you will understand that God did not simply remove something from your life. He was making room. And the space that once felt empty may not remain empty forever. But before anything new can fill that space, you must stop reaching backward to refill it with what God already removed. Chosen one, now you are standing at the place where the lesson becomes freedom. You have walked through confusion, disappointment, unanswered questions, and moments when you wondered whether you were imagining what your spirit was sensing. But God has been showing you that you were never abandoned in those moments. Even when you could not see the whole picture, heaven was not blind to your situation. Even when J believed the truth could remain hidden, God already knew the beginning, the middle, and the end. And now you must make a decision. You must decide that the revelation will not become another chain. You must decide that what was hidden will not control what is ahead. You must decide that you will not spend the rest of your life standing at the door of a chapter God already closed. Chosen one, there is a time to ask questions, and there is a time to move forward without every answer. There is a time to investigate, and there is a time to release. There is a time to understand what happened, and there is a time to understand who you are becoming because it happened. This is your time to move forward. You have learned enough to know that your peace is valuable. You have learned enough to know that words without actions are empty. You have learned enough to know that someone can say they care and still make choices that reveal otherwise. You have learned enough to know that you should never have to beg someone to treat you with basic respect. And most importantly, you have learned enough to know that God's direction is more trustworthy than your attachment to any person. So let the past remain where it belongs. If J remembers you, let them remember. If J regrets something, let them regret it. If J eventually understands what they lost, let that understanding belong to them. You do not have to wait around for their realization. Your future cannot be placed on hold until somebody else develops the maturity to recognize your value. God has already seen your value. That is enough. Chosen one. Perhaps the greatest victory is not that J was exposed. Perhaps the greatest victory is that you no longer need to expose them. You no longer need to prove what happened. You no longer need to convince everyone who is right. You no longer need to win the argument. Because peace is a greater victory than being publicly vindicated. There will be moments when people finally realize the truth about you, but by then you may have already moved so far forward that their opinion no longer carries the same weight, and that is okay. Sometimes God vindicates you by changing your life rather than changing people's opinions. He allows your character to speak through consistency. He allows your future to answer accusations. He allows your peace to become evidence that you survived what was meant to break you. Chosen one, do not be afraid of the next chapter simply because the previous chapter contained betrayal. The next person is not the previous person. The next opportunity is not the previous opportunity. The next season is not the previous season, and you are not the same person who entered the last season. You carry wisdom now. You carry discernment. You carry experience. You carry boundaries. You carry a deeper understanding of yourself. So do not punish your future because of what happened in your past. Do not reject genuine love because someone once gave you counterfeit affection. Do not reject opportunity because someone once disappointed you. Do not reject friendship because one person betrayed your trust. Do not reject happiness because you once experienced heartbreak. God did not create you to live permanently in defense mode. He created you to live, and living requires risk. It requires trust. It requires courage. It requires you to open your heart again without handing everyone the keys to it. That is the balance you are learning. Chosen one, when you finally understand this, you will stop seeing the revelation as something terrifying. You will see it as mercy. God allowed you to see what you needed to see. He did not necessarily show you everything at once because he knew your heart needed time to process it. But now the pieces are connecting. Now the confusion is becoming clarity. Now the questions are becoming lessons. Now the pain is becoming wisdom. And now the door is opening. Walk through it. Do not turn around every few steps to see whether J is following. Your assignment is ahead. Your life is ahead. Your peace is ahead. Your purpose is ahead. The future God has for you is ahead. Chosen one, there is no need to carry resentment into a place God designed for restoration. Leave the bitterness behind. Leave the endless replaying behind. Leave the imaginary conversations behind. Leave the need to be understood by everyone behind. Take the lesson. Take the wisdom. Take the discernment. Take the strength. But leave the chains. Because what happened was part of your story, but it does not have to become the title of your life. You are more than what someone did to you. You are more than what someone said about you. You are more than what someone withheld from you. You are more than the relationship that ended. You are more than the door that closed. You are more than the betrayal. God is still writing. And as long as God is writing, the story is not finished. So chosen one, breathe, release, forgive where you can, set boundaries where you must. Trust God with what you cannot control, and walk forward without looking for permission. You do not need J to understand. You do not need J to apologize. You do not need J to return. You do not need J to regret losing you. You need peace. You need wisdom. You need faith. And you need the courage to believe that what God has ahead of you can be greater than what you left behind. One day, you will look back at this season and realize that the thing you thought was breaking you was actually breaking your dependence on the wrong people. You will understand why God allowed certain doors to close. You will understand why certain relationships could not continue. You will understand why some prayers were answered through separation instead of restoration. And you will thank God, not because the pain was good, not because betrayal was acceptable, not because what happened did not matter, but because God took what was painful and refused to let it be wasted. He turned the lesson into wisdom. He turned the tears into strength. He turned the disappointment into discernment. He turned the ending into a beginning. And he turned your attention away from J and back toward him. That is the real revelation. Chosen one, the secret was never simply what Jay did. The deeper revelation was who you are after everything was exposed. You are still standing. You are still believing. You are still becoming. You are still capable of love. You are still capable of joy. You are still capable of dreaming. You are still capable of trusting God. And that means the enemy did not get the final word. The betrayal did not get the final word. The rejection did not get the final word. The hidden conversations did not get the final word. Jay does not get the final word. God does. So lift your head. Release the past. Protect your peace. Walk with wisdom. And enter the next season knowing that what is meant for you does not require you to destroy yourself to receive it. What is meant for you will meet you in alignment. What is meant for you will not require you to abandon your identity. What is meant for you will not demand that you compromise your relationship with God. And what is truly from God will produce fruit that does not require constant confusion. So go forward, chosen one. Go forward without revenge. Go forward without fear. Go forward without needing everyone to understand. Go forward knowing that God saw everything. He saw what you saw. He saw what you did not see. He heard what you never heard. He knew what you never knew. And when the time came, He allowed the truth to rise. Now your responsibility is not to live in the revelation. Your responsibility is to live beyond it. Let the truth set you free. Let the lesson make you wiser. Let the experience make you stronger. Let the healing make you softer toward the right people and firmer toward the wrong ones. Let God restore what the season tried to steal. And when you finally step into the life that was waiting beyond this chapter, you will realize that Jay never had the power to destroy your destiny. They were only part of the story. God was always writing the whole book. And chosen one, this is where you stop looking backward for answers and start looking forward with faith. Because the chapter that once caused you to cry is becoming the chapter that taught you how to walk away, how to discern, how to trust, how to heal, and how to recognize the difference between what you desperately wanted and what God was actually preparing for you. The truth came to light. The lesson has been received. The past has been released. And now, with your heart wiser and your spirit stronger, you can step into what comes next knowing that God did not reveal everything to destroy you. He revealed it to free you. And sometimes the greatest miracle is not getting back what you lost. Sometimes the greatest miracle is becoming the person who no longer needs it. Chosen one, walk forward. Your story continues. And this time, you are not walking with the weight of the past on your shoulders. You are walking with wisdom in your heart, faith in your spirit, and trust in the God who saw everything from the beginning. And that is where your freedom begins.